South Korea is stepping up its fight against air pollution. The government has now passed emergency laws calling it a social disaster. The move will help to unlock emergency funds to be used to tackle the fine dust pollution that has blanketed the country in recent weeks. Now, for more on this, let's get across to Bruce Harrison in Seoul. And Bruce, tell us some of the details then that the bill is seeking to include, and tell us also why it is you're standing where you are.
Well, I decided to get outside today because the air is actually quite clean here in Seoul this evening. If you can see behind me, there's a blue tower. It's not always blue. When the air pollution is quite bad here, that tower lights up bright red. And there's varying levels. There's green, which is better, and then there's yellow, and then there's the red. But it's blue, which means the air is quite clean tonight and fresh. And we're seeing fewer of those days because of the massive fine dust problem that you mentioned, which the government now has felt an immense amount of pressure to finally deal with. So they have passed these emergency measures. It includes a $2.65 billion emergency fund, which the government can access to help prevent another outbreak like we saw in February and March of fine dust buildup in the city. This 2.5 p.m. particulate matter that the World Health Organization says is damaging to your lungs. This money can also be used in recovery efforts for the city after fine dust blankets much of Seoul, as we've seen lately. Some of the laws that were also passed will mandate that schools install air purifying systems. We've seen recently days where kids weren't allowed to go outside for recess. They're shut into their classrooms during that lunch period or that recess period because the air quality has been deemed simply unbreathable, sensitive or unhealthy for sensitive groups, and some days they say stay in altogether. The measures also would allow more LPG cars or liquefied natural gas cars to be on the road because they produce fewer emissions than their diesel and gasoline burning cousins that are big carbon emitters and part of the problem in Seoul with the fine dust problem.
All right, Bruce, you mentioned, it's a cool night, one of those good evenings that you're having. Is the air quality expected to improve over the next few days? And also, speaking of improvement, since President Moon has announced these bills, will Parliament's action work fast enough to improve his own ratings?
Well, in the next few days, we're actually expected to see a decent quality of air here in Seoul, but it isn't expected to last over the long term. Typically in spring is when we see some heavy air pollution in the capital. And a lot of that is from China. Some of it is a fine dust particulate matter that comes in the form of what's called yellow dust. It's from barren parts of southern Mongolia and northern China that is blown up in the wind and drifts across the sea to the Korean peninsula. There was reports recently that some of the fine dust in the city was from a large Chinese fireworks festival. A lot of air pollution does flow over from that part of the world to the Korean peninsula. It's also locally produced as well. And like I said, spring typically sees an uptick. Actually, what we experienced late February, early March was a bit unusually heavy for that time of the year. As far as President Moon's ratings, he has half of his term left in office. So he's implementing these emergency levels measures now, hoping to appease the public, which has been quite upset with the quality of air in the city. But it's going to take a long time for these measures truly to take effect, especially when it comes to getting cleaner fuel-burning cars on the road and shutting down coal-fired power plants that produce a lot of nasty emissions that pollute the air. President Moon may be able to lay the foundation for what ultimately will be a cleaner city, but it's not going to happen fast. So it's hard to say if his ratings will improve because the air is not going to improve that quickly.
All right, thanks for that. Bruce Harrison speaking to us from South Korea, Seoul.